Wake up with the Hot Breakfast.
The best show in the morning.
Kenya's hottest take on the day's news. Wake up. Wake up, wake up, wake up. It is exactly 14 minutes past the hour, 7 o'clock on this wicked, wild and wet Wednesday morning. It's our Wednesday conversation today. You need to listen carefully, because this is something that's very, very important. There's something known as 16 days of activism that started, I think, a couple of days ago, and it'll go on for the next couple of weeks. And it's all about awareness. It's all about what's been happening in our society. GBV, gender-based violence, is on the rise. Women being killed left, right, and center. It's all crazy out there. And people say mental health issues are to blame. But hey, maybe there's even more. So, to discuss this in the studio, we have a great panel of guests. We've got the Uasin Gishu Women's Rep, who also happens to be the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Gladys the Boss is in the house. And right next to her is Harriette Chiggai. She's a Senior Advisor to the President on women's issues. Ladies, welcome to Hot 96.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
And thank you for having us.
Thank you. So listen, boss, GBV on the rise. I mean, it's very disturbing. Every other day or every day in the newspapers, there's a case that we see of another woman, either who's been cut up, abused, killed. What's going on?
I think what's going on is GVV has been going on for a long time, except that it's not taken seriously, and there are no consequences. And many people believe that gender-based violence is a women's issue. They don't think it's a societal problem. So nothing is done to people. You know, if you look at other countries, the consequences of domestic violence is so severe that no man will dare. You've seen what even happens to NBA stars, you know, senior politicians, top politicians. Either they end up paying a lot of damages to get out of it, or these are such consequences that they cannot even run for political office. So here there are no consequences. When I was at University of Cape Town, I stayed in an apartment with boys. It was the first time, and I was horrified. You know, I thought, oh my God, are there something going to happen to me? Because I had grown up having separate dorms, even at university, for men and women. But in Cape Town, we shared apartments.
And it was fine.
We shared bathrooms.
And it was fine.
It was fine. But I later realized they were so well behaved. Why? They would never even come and knock at my bedroom door, because we had separate bedrooms, but we shared the bathrooms on the corridor. And they would never even come and knock on your door. They would call you on intercom to come out to the main the kitchen area and the sitting area where we shared. And later I realized it's because the sexual harassment policy was so severe. If I reported a man, they would be suspended first for a year. The hearing starts a year later. So before we hear you, so no one would dare. And many of them, if they visited you, they wouldn't even come to your apartment. They would remain at the central office downstairs, and you'd be called to walk out there. It was very, very clear. The professors, if they were speaking to you in their office, the door would be open. Because no one wanted to ever be in a situation where they have problems. Today, most superstars, they actually have a consent form already developed by their lawyer. So even if they're going to sleep with a girl, she's got to sign it first, because it's because the sentence is extremely harsh. Here there are no consequences. Our weakest link is the police. The police do not actually think it's a crime, and the police they take it very lightly. I've been to the police station in Uasin Gishu County, where I've had to intervene on certain cases together with there's a gentleman called Kitura, a lawyer, who's a human rights activist, and he'd brought a girl who the mother and the daughter had been beaten, broken hand, and the police were not giving them a P3 form. So you can imagine they've gone to the hospital, then they've got to walk back to the police station to ask for the P3 form to take it back to the hospital. And that's why one of the issues we discussed the other day with Harriette and the president is that what needs to happen is that all these gender desks that are in the police station must be moved to the hospitals. Because if someone is beaten, where do you go first? The hospital.
Yeah.
If you're raped, you go to the hospital. Why should I be made to go back now to the police to report after I've gone to the hospital? Why doesn't that police officer, who is apparently called a gender police officer, they've been trained, but they don't help. It's useless at the point. So unless it's moved to the hospital where the patient is, so that even the space for bribes and intimidation doesn't happen, because there's already a doctor, there's a nurse, the person is in a safe space to report it.
Harriette, you agree?
I totally agree. First, let me just say, Shole is my teacher. So I really hold her in high esteem.
This is Mwalimu.
This is Mwalimu for me. So I think the UN Women has actually released a report. They released a report on Monday. And from looking at where we are right now, you realize that the problem is actually escalating globally, because they did a sample test or a sample size analysis of the ages of 15 to 45. And shocking enough, within that report, they're actually saying every 10 minutes, there's a woman or a girl being killed somewhere. And the numbers, global numbers, is actually about 736 million. As we stand, 2023. When you break it down, within that same report, 640 is intimate partner violence.
Yeah.
What does this tell us? The problem is within considered spaces where we call them safe. Our homes, our workplaces, school. So it then means that whatever problem we are having is a societal problem. And government or government agencies then come after the fact. So what then do we need to do? Because by the time you're told global 40% age between 15 and 49, 40% of women have been violated. That is a very high number. And when we come back home, you're actually told in 2023, the reported cases were about 241 were actually intimate partner violence. Husbands killing their wives, About 130, it's boyfriend killing their girlfriends. 99, it's strangers or a unknown person or someone you have seen around. About 19 is ex-husbands, 18 family members, 17 ex-boyfriend. Those are reported cases. Remember, we have unreported cases. Or cases
so you can
which are the majority. So what that tells me is that the problem is escalating. And the question then we ask ourselves is why? What can we do to actually reduce the cases other than us always being reactive? And that is where we are coming in. And for me, that is where we actually laud the president for being the number one champion, because everybody else then can fit into his conversation and can steer conversation, having the president led that conversation. And that then gives women and women leaders even a bigger voice to actually spotlight the issues that are happening. So with the statistics that we have, the problem is in our homes. The problem is within the safe spaces or spaces where Kenyans believe or women believe they are safe, whether it's school, whether it's within the church compounds, whether it's within the household setup. And you can clearly see there are many factors that are leading to this. And it's purely a broken society. So the question then is, how do we all fix a broken society? Everybody then has a role to play in terms of fixing
and
it.
Yet we're not playing that role, Mheshimiwa. We're not playing that role.
Yes.
We are, we have no respect for our women for the most part, which is sad.
Yes. And you see, I think, and that's what I'm saying, it's the entire society has to rally around dealing with this, so that we begin from our homes. We begin to think deliberately. We must begin to teach our boys from a very young age to respect themselves and to also respect women. We must also begin to pick out, it starts when they're very young, and they'll make fun of a girl, and it starts like that and escalates. So it's building up. So, and I think it's something that should be compulsory, taught at schools right from the beginning. And you'll see a young man will now punch down a girl at school, and people think that it's normal.
Yeah, and they laugh at it.
And they laugh a bit at it, and so on. Yeah. And even the subtle information at home, where the parents sort of think that the boy is more privileged than the girls. So it starts in a subtle way, and we have to begin in our homes. We have to start beginning in our schools. We've got to teach it in the churches. These kids go to Sunday school. Let us make sure that is ingrained in them because it's a personality defect, and then also teach our young women life skills, and basic things. For example, one of the things I always told my daughter is never go for a first date in a private place. It should always be in a public place. Never go to house parties, because that's again where a lot of the abuse is happening with the young women. People are renting. I think they rent Airbnbs, and then they have a private party there. That's where they'll spike your drink. Then you end up getting raped. And then also, if you're going somewhere, you must always inform another member of the family where you're going, and so on, so that if you're missing for a few hours, somebody can help you. Because if we don't deal with it as parents, and from the homestead, and as teachers, and as caregivers, it's not going to be resolved. Because by the time we report, when people blame the police, by the time you report to the police, the person is either already raped or is dead. So it's too late by that time. So even though we are saying we want the police to be more proactive, we also must work on prevention, that we don't get to that situation. So there has to be more vigilance. For example, there's a law that says if an underaged child is defiled in your establishment, if you have a hotel or whatever, you're actually also an accessory to the offense.
You, the owner.
The owner, yes. But I've never seen any owner taken up. I know we have a case in Mombasa where I was telling them, let's go after the owner of the establishment also. Because then people will be careful now. When they see an underage gay kid coming with somebody in their building, they're like, no, I don't want to, So again, we have laws. There's no consequences. We set up, we had got the Sexual Offences Act. Then we got the Sexual Offences Register. I don't know where it is at this stage. Maybe Harriette will tell us. And in overseas, you are on a register for life. And what will happen is, every time you want to move into a neighborhood, they are alerted. And the neighborhood can refuse that you can't live in the area. As
a sex offender.
Yes. So it is so severe that no one dares to do it. So something has to deter them. Yeah. From doing this, and it's happening in every spaces. Like I said, I was talking to some athletes recently, and their ask was, can you train more female physiotherapists? Can you train female masseuses? To help them with their massage therapy during their sports. Can you get us more female coaches? And there were some retired ones who said, I'm willing to be trained as a physiotherapist. I'm willing to be trained as a masseuse. And when I asked them why, they said that's where the abuse happens also. Because they said all the massage therapists are male, and they said anakufanyia massage alafu anafanya kila kitu. So it starts there. Yeah. And it's been normalized. We must tell people it is the worst crime ever. It's better to rob a bank.
And Harriette, you're a little younger than us, so when we were growing up, we didn't have this rate of madness. It was maybe it was there, but we never noticed that. I mean, people could walk at night and feel safe. Young girls now can't do that. They feel like they wouldn't get home without being abused in one way or another, because men think they have all the latitude to do what they want. What happened? What went wrong?
First, let me just say this. 16 days of activism actually came up because of the escalation of the violence against women and children, especially girls. And when you look at the violence, we have the female genital mutilation, which was high at that time. But now we are having femicide that is actually taking a run and running over, FGM. When we were growing up, for me, really, I remember we would go to school. I schooled in a school where we had so many army children. And when they would come to pick their kids, we were all picked in the army bus, or we would all swing, you know, that rope for the army. We all take a ride up and jump into the lorry, and that was fun. It was fun growing up. I remember within the small estate, any neighbor would find you and ask you, how is your mom doing? Is mom at home? They get hold of your hand, walk you back home. But right now, that has changed, as you're saying. In fact, if you have a young child right now, you're literally leashing them on your palm, you know, so that at any given time, you know, where is my child? You're leashing them so that they don't go out of your radius of your watch. And that tells me again, it's the society. The society has become so cruel. We are refocusing our energies into things that really don't matter. Either we are overlooking for money, or I don't know what we are looking for, because if you have a safe society, and for as long as women and children are not safe, then even the GDP we are running around will not work. And I'll give you an example. In 2022-2023, teenage pregnancies alone cost this government 6.9 billion to deliver those children.
And this was post-COVID, right? This was right after COVID.
Yeah. And if you do that calculation, because when a young child delivers another child, they can't deliver that child normal. So it has to go through a CS. The cost is on government. And these calculations, I think very few people have done it. That cost of delivering that child is actually on government, because they have to go to a government hospital and a CS has to be done, because they cannot deliver normal delivery. When you cost the number of pregnancies that were reported and then put the cost to it, the government lost 6.9 billion Kenya shillings. So what are we saying? The government is actually bleeding from all directions. And when you look at the new regulations for health, there's a law on data collection. And there goes the good point that my teacher has put across, that we need gender desks now to move to hospitals. Because with the new law that is advising SHIF, what that means is that once data has been collected at source, we can now use that data in hospital. So you do not have to re-victimize the victim. And that particular portion, my office took part in ensuring that we have defined an indigent in the laws, you know. Also, the government is saying, let's move to preventive measures vis-a-vis curative. How do we then prevent these young girls from getting to this position where they are? And there goes parenting. You know, parents must now be very deliberate, because I personally feel most parents have outsourced parenting. You take your kids to boarding, it's the teachers to do the job. You know, you take your kids to school, it's the teachers to do your job, you know.
And don't forget the maids at home.
And then we have the maids at home. The caregivers at home also, we are not watching what they are doing, because some of them are also aggressors. You know, by the time you get to know that this is happening to your child, it is too late. You know, we've also seen many angles where you find kids are also lost within technology. Yeah, we now have a new trend of abuse, technology-assisted GBV, where women leaders, journalists are actually highly violated within that space. Now, what is the content that our children are facing? Because with the kind of acceleration globally on matters technology, children cannot be left out. They have to be taught how to be in the tech space. The question is, what is the content? Who is reviewing the content? Who is approving the content that the children are exposed to, you know? So we have a multifaceted reasons as to why we are having all these problems, because some of these kids, then their brains are twisted at a very early age because of what they have been exposed to. And by the time they become grown-ups, we then have social misfits, you know. So how then do we protect our children so that as they grow up, we don't have this hate relationship?
And right? You're right. And Mahesh, just to pick on that, social media has not helped very much in a lot of respects.
No,
you see boy child versus girl child, and they go after each other.
No, but also just imagine, because if you see, what is on the internet is uncontrolled.
Yeah.
So if somebody is watching sexual violence all the time on the internet from when they're young, even when they grow up, they think it's normal.
Yeah.
They think that's so they have a completely, sexual violence has become normal to them. So raping is normal because they've been seeing it. And it's even almost glorified if you in the movies. You know, that kind of lifestyle is glorified and abusing women and so on.
So they think it's cool.
So they think it's cool, and they think it's, it does something to your brain. If you see, it's like watching violent movies and shooting people all the time. That's why there's a lot of shootings in the US, because guns have been normalized, and they're watching movies where somebody's spraying 10 people at a time. Then they think they can go and act it out at school when they are upset. So you begin to lose what is normal and abnormal. And so with that happening, that's why I'm saying we've got to up our game in schools. Because now that we know the kids are exposed to this, have we changed our curriculum to make sure that part of the life skills we teach them is this? When I was in school, we had home science, and that was the life skills we needed. They taught us how to repair a button, how to bake a cake, how to, like those were the things we needed to survive. They taught us about how to boil water, how to be careful not to have an accident in the kitchen. They taught us about kerosene and the things the dangers and so on. So those were our challenges. They taught us about, I remember one of the biggest things was crossing the river, right? And like I said, the Harriette says, it was safe those days. Our parents didn't think about us being in trouble. My parents would put me in a matatu in Eldoret with my siblings, and we'd walk for 6 kilometers from Chepkorio Center to my grandfather's house. And we'd be gone for 3 weeks. We didn't call her back to say we'd arrived, but she knew we were safe. Yeah. Because you knew the entire society, as you walked, we used to walk the whole day, play at the river, we'd get home in the evening. Because that life was so safe. But you knew also, and sometimes a neighbor would see you and say, where you guys? We're going to my grandpa's. And they're like, why are you guys playing in the river? It's time to go home, So people took responsibility. That doesn't exist now. Today, if your daughter is going somewhere, you're telling her, make sure you have a rape spray in your handbag, Yeah. You're literally teaching them to protect themselves, because she's going into hostile territory. Yeah. So it's a scary world. The internet has not helped at all. But like Harriette is saying, her campaign is about preventing it. So the way to prevent it is to make sure that it makes its way to every platform where we can teach young people. We should be asking the media houses to dedicate a portion of your time, your airspace and radio space, to talk about this. Yeah. Yes.
Harriette,
and we are appealing to you people to do that.
Absolutely. And Harriette, and 16 days is not enough. Let's face it.
It has to be lifelong.
Exactly.
It's not enough.
Yeah.
In fact, the genesis of 16 days previously, it's civil society that used to write letters to government. In fact, I remember when I got into this office, a good friend of mine approached me and told me, 16 days of activism, it's not for government to do anything. I said, why? He said it's for civil society to write letters to government. Then I said, but that's the problem. Mm-hmm. So you guys are telling me that you've been writing letters to government, yelling at government for all this time, and you still think that's the best way to go about it? And I said, no. Government has to respond. But how does government respond? By taking action. So I am truly happy, especially with the leadership of today, the women leaders, the government, because guys have actually realized this is a need. It's a problem that has to be resolved. And we are saying, how do we resolve this problem? Because I always tell people, love equals hate. When you love each other, the moment you hate each other, the hate becomes times 10.
Yeah.
So it's a deep dive, like you're going deep down the sea, Yes. And there's really no reasoning at that time, because The love that you had has now turned into hate. And the hate relationship can be very, very, very severe. So then you realize, we said, no, we have to tweak the conversation. You cannot have hatred conversation for 10 years and still think anything positive will come out of it. So what do we need to do different for us to change this? Where is the problem? So many people told me, like the teen pregnancy issue, border borders were highly cited. We went to the field and then we realized it's not border alone. I went to Busia and half a room was filled with raped kids from the age of 2 to about the youngest was 2 to about the age of 26, and only 2 parents were courageous enough to be there with their daughters. Only 2. And I allowed those 2 parents, because they were men actually. They actually came with their daughters and they have stood by their daughters all through the court process. But you then realize the wheels of justice is also not fair to victims of gender-based violence. The wheel of justice first, it's taking too long to address the children cases. So every time these children appear in court, it's like they're being re-victimized. They're being reminded of what happened to them. So that has to change, you know, because we have to ensure that once the cases are reported, proper documentation is taken, proper medicals are taken, and these children don't have to keep repeating their story. And I can assure you, everybody says children lie. Children don't tell lies. Children don't lie. They actually say it as it is, you know. And where a child tells a lie, you'll catch the lie, because they can't. They will break at some point, you know. But we do not have to keep re-victimizing the victims. The hate speech that has been going on, fear women, that is a very bad tag, because you can imagine the young kids growing now are living within the tag of fear women. It's a very bad tag. So we need as a society also to be responsible. I have seen there's a new song out where the dance is about cutting each other with a panga.
I saw that.
And kids are dancing to that. Now,
she's normalizing. That's what I said. We are normalizing violence.
So how did we even allow that song to be aired? You know? Because it looks like it's fun, but the visual and the message that is being passed across, it's a hate message. So we also need the actors within all these spaces to now start being vigilant. And some of those things just shut them off, because these kids are being creative. They are trying to be creative, but they also need to know that the content they are producing is very, very dangerous.
Remember, they are being inspired by violence. That is frightening. That is really scary. Because usually creative, you're inspired by something that you appreciate or something that you experienced. So have they, you know, so it's
the environment they have grown.
And they're actually using pangas in these videos.
Oh, yes.
Real pangas.
Yes, and the dance is actually cut to kill, you know. I saw that video on social media.
Seen that one.
And I was like, why? How is this music still playing in our spaces?
We have an organization that's supposed to vet
MCSK.
Yes.
Yeah, but you see now they are asleep, because you can't allow that to keep airing, because there's a way our education system made us cram things. What is put in our brains is what we carry along for some time until something else now comes, then it's put.
In fact, I call it planting a seed. When a seed has been planted in your brain, a kid's brain, it just grows. And that's what I'm saying. It has to be a concerted campaign. It can't be one person. That's why that music society has a role. You know, the leadership has a role. It has to be the schools, the church. We have to make it that every day you have to have a lesson a week teaching about this. And then even just like I realized when you gave me the hotlines, I was actually telling the women leaders, I mean, we've got to be singing these hotlines every day. Because so you guys have to also help us in the media by announcing it. Did you know that there's hotlines you can call for help, toll free? numbers.
Do you have them with you?
Yeah, for domestic violence.
Yeah. We'll
so
give
we need to keep on reminding
Yes.
people. If you see somebody violated, if you've been, and then even just tell young people, if you're raped, rush to the hospital, because also them getting to the hospital as quickly as possible is important, because many people have the urge to go and shower. I tell them, rush to the hospital, because at the hospital you can get treatment to prevent some sexually transmitted diseases immediately, and then you also can get the help that you need at that time.
And hopefully you get it quickly, because some women rush to the hospital and they're made to wait for hours.
Exactly.
And that is so, I mean, it adds to the...
Yes, and that's why we're saying if we have that gender desk at the hospital, it means they're not queuing with the other patients. They're going right there, and it means that gender officer will make sure that they get the fast attention. So it's basic things like that.
Yeah, and maybe just to finish on what you were discussing. So as government, then we are saying, so that we don't lose that one, we are not going to make the noise within the 16 days of activism alone. We want to go beyond 16 days of activism. And that is why we are launching the Safe Home, Safe Spaces campaign. And it's a really behavioral change campaign. For instance, if the boda people are being accused, we want to tell them that boda is your office, you know? And anyone who comes to your office, you have to treat them nicely, you know? You must have a helmet. Your passengers must have a helmet. And the courtesies of dealing within your office must suffice. And we want them to be actually the change agents, because you can imagine in this country we have more than 3 million bodas. If all of them were properly registered, if all of them were properly trained, if all of them understood that,
they became our campaigners,
that would be the best thing that we can have in this country. And that really is our rallying call. So that particular group should be actually our best male champions, and we are looking for the best male champions, and anyone can join the campaign.
How can you convince them? You know,
we are going to do it because remember, behavior change is the hardest thing you can ever do. It's the hardest, but somebody has to do the hard job, you know, and it cannot be done by one person. And that is why we are saying the church plays a key role in the society, because at any given week, people are in the church. Muslims, at any given time, they will go to the mosque.
And the children are in Sunday school.
The children are in Sunday school, you know.
Or they're in madras.
Yes.
So we must tell them this is important. Society has changed. You can't now just stick to biblical teaching. You must also teach them life skills and behavioral, acceptable behavior.
And then Kenyans also have to accept that there are some cultures which are bad, and we need to do away with them, because cultural biases play a key role in how we treat our women and children. And remember, any society where women and children cannot walk freely, it cannot even grow economically. The GDP will definitely go down, because if you look at farming, 65% of women are in the farms. You know, in communities where farming is the source of livelihood, you know, and Kenya is one of those. If you look at our rural setup, 65% of our women are in those farms. So then we are saying everybody has to come in and play a key role. The media plays a key role in how to shape conversations and how Kenyans want to perceive life as a whole. So we need to start changing conversations around how we treat women and children.
Give us that toll-free number.
You asked about the hotlines. We have the GBV hotline 1195. The child helpline is 116, and DCI also has a number 0800-722-203. So those are the 3 lines that Kenyans can call any given time, and someone will address.
Give us that number again. GBV line
1195, child helpline 116, and DCI is 0800.
The DCI one is too long. Can you tell them to change it first?
Yeah, they need a 4-digit number.
I mean, yes. Are you going to let a kid cram this?
No.
Or a lady in the village?
Can't.
Yeah, so we just want to tell people, ukiona mama amepigwa, ama mtoto amepigwa, piga 1195. Simple.
Or 116.
Okay.
Or 116.
The other thing that's very disturbing that we see in the papers and online is young men raping old women. What happened to that? I mean, where did things go wrong?
I can
like a
address that.
70-year-old woman being raped by a 21-year-old.
We've done fact finding, and that is something that we found. So in communities where the older women have taken all the young girls, the young men don't have women to marry. There are other communities where they believe the older women are going to God, they are closer to God. So it's cultic, it's a cultural thing. So they believe that by raping these older women, they are taking their many years on earth, their blessings or something.
Good
and
Lord.
That is why I'm saying our
That's
cultural
sick.
biases.
That's sick.
Yeah, it's our cultural biases, because we've gone round and we've checked and we've asked around. It's our cultural biases. And then we have a bigger problem, just like the law enforcement, because the laws are there. The problem is the wheels of justice. It's too slow, one. Number two, you have communities where the chiefs, the chiefs now want to play the role of courts by being given one cow, 2 goats, and they hide these things. These things should not be hidden. We cannot hide them under the carpet anymore. All these cases must go to court and they must be prosecuted. So the criminal justice system also has to step up, and that is where the police come in. When the police receive victims at the police station, how do they handle them? So then there comes the need to have more police trained to be gender sensitive, and to deal with gender crimes or crimes that affect women and girls differently, so that you don't re-victimize the victims. And remember, last time I was here, I said, while we think it's only the girls who are being raped, the men now should start checking the number of boys who are being raped. Boys are being raped because for a long time we thought it's good to do it to the girls. Now we are now attacking the boy child. And the numbers are gruesome, because when we checked in 2023, when we checked the data, in Nairobi we had 1,576 raped cases, reported boys. And I happened to go to Mukuru slums in one of the medical facilities there. And it happened the day I went, a boy had just been brought. So if we are going to rape 1,576 boys, assuming every month, multiply that by 12, multiply that by 10, 15 years, we will not have men to marry our daughters.
Mahesh, would more legislation help for you and your colleagues out there in that house? Would it help?
I think we have sufficient legislation. What we don't have is that there are no consequences. That means people are not tried, people are not convicted, the justice is not swift enough, a lot of witnesses back off eventually, or what happens is, on the day of the hearing, because it's taken so long and the person is out on bail, they intimidate the witnesses. So that's why you hear cases are cancelled, are withdrawn because there's no witness. But we must make it such that once the evidence has been taken, because normally you already have a witness statement, once that has been taken, it should be taken under oath, so that even if the person disappears, the court can proceed with it. So there are a few weaknesses in our legislation which can fix, but again, I said it has to be a campaign, that we have to talk to each other, everybody has to be involved. For example, I find the Kenya National Human Rights Commission, they're an independent commission, heavily funded. But this should be there. They should take this on also, because it's a human rights issue. They should be dealing with it. But instead they're dealing with abductions, things that are politically sexy. They seem to like to talk about those things. When you look at IPOA, how many complaints against the police who have refused to assist victims? But they don't find that as a very serious issue. They'll only deal with where a police officer has shot someone, and but they don't follow it up. The National Gender and Equality Commission, that's also part of their. So we also have so many institutions that are failing. So now we must begin to say, this is also your problem, because people seem to say the government should deal with it, and I'm just wondering, where is the government? We are also the government. We've got institutions, and even as a church, you're a government. Even as a school, you're a government in yourself, because you have the power and you have the ability to be able to take this on. And that's what I'm saying. We should not stop talking about it. Let's keep talking about it until it is in our heads, because that is the problem. Because when there is a case, we read about it in the newspaper, and then that's the end of it. Do we ever follow up what happened? Did anybody follow up about the women who were raped? I saw that being done. We need to look at it. We also know we have a crisis in our universities. in our universities, the boy child has become so disempowered because life is tough. They don't have much money in their hands. They're hardly able to afford meals. And then the girls will have a sponsor, so they'll be living large. The ones who can take an Uber and have a fancy handbag and able to afford food and so on. There are some other girls who end up, there's in fact I went to Moi University a few years ago, and nobody uses the hostels, and they have very good hostels that were built those days. I said, why are they dilapidated? They said nobody uses them. I said, where do the students live? They said they prefer to live in the shopping center. Why? Because the university wouldn't allow two people to, a male and female, to share a room. So they rather be in the shopping center. Because of hard economic times, they end up living together. So you find this girl who's washing clothes, because that's also a form of abuse. Because maybe this boy has a little more money, he'll pay for your meals, then you'll end up cooking for him, and you'll end up washing for him, and so on. But you also have the extreme where the young men feel they have no money, and the girls go off with all these rich sponsors, and that's why you find them, they're preying on old women. You know, so it's just everything that has happened. So it's quite. We also need to talk at the universities a lot, because that's where also a lot of the abuse also happens.
Yeah, we need to go back to our factory settings, Harriette. I think at the end of the day,
we must.
Bottom line, talk to the young girls out there. What do you tell them?
For me, the young girls first, they need to know they are whole human beings, and the responsibility to take action, think, and the responsibility of their safety space starts with themselves. It's important that the young girls listen to actually their parents, teachers. I remember when we were in school, we were scared about being in campus and getting yourself in trouble. Nowadays, it's an all free range kind of lifestyle, you know. So the young girls need to understand that the life they are living now will define how their future will look like. Time lost today can actually never be recovered, you know, and there's really time for everything. So for me, my advice to the young girls is that they need to be extremely extra cautious with the kind of friends they have, the relationships they have, the sites that they visit, you know, and they take their life back into their own hands before a second or third party comes in to give them that protection.
Absolutely. Yeah. Mahesh, you get the last word.
Yes, again, I said I'll tell the young girls that the femicide is real and it's here. Rape is real and it's here. Domestic violence is real and it's here. So first, what we're going to do is you're going to be your own first line of defense by the way you behave. So be careful. Every time, don't ever let your antenna down. Do not trust anyone. Just because you met someone on the internet doesn't mean they're your friend. And sometimes being on the internet, they show you their house, you're on video call, they show you what they're doing every day until you begin to think that you know that person and trust them. But they could be a serial killer or some crazy guy or a criminal, you know. So don't take everything that someone shows you on the internet to be real. So you've got to be careful. So if you have to meet that person, don't meet them alone. Don't meet them in a private place. Make sure you're in a place where everybody else is. Don't be careful about the spaces that you go to. Like I said, private parties are really scary because no one knows you're there. It's uncontrolled. You see, at least a public establishment, there's bouncers, there's receptionists, there's people around there. So it's very important to be careful. Also, don't put yourself in a vulnerable position. I'm not saying that that you are wrong if you do that, but I'm just saying let us be conscious that there's many people out there who have no qualms about killing women, taking advantage of them, and raping them. And most importantly, if this happens to you, rush to the hospital, not the police station. Get to the hospital, get help. Scream if you have to when you get there and say, I need to be attended to right away. But most importantly, always tell someone where you have been. Yeah. Always have that one person that you can tell. Because again, sometimes they can't get the immediate help they need because no one kept that. But I'd also appeal to the young men that what happened, you've got to go back and say you're the protectors of your sisters. When we were in university, we'd go out to the discos with our male classmates, and they used to protect us. They'd go with us, and they'd make sure they brought us back until we get back to our rooms. You felt safe around them. So we've got to also inculcate in our boys from a very young age that your job is to protect your sister.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Wise words from two very wise women. Thank you so much for your input. We appreciate it. Gladys the Boss, women's rep from Uasin Gishu, also Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, and Harriette Chiggai, she's Senior Advisor to the President on matters women and human rights. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
This
Thanks
is no
for
doubt.
having us.
Thank you.
And announce the hotline.
Oh yes, again
1195
and
for the
116.
kids.
and 116
For the kids.
Yeah.
This is no doubt what we call
Candid interviews with decision makers.